The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the boarding house in Winslow, Arizona Territory, and Beatrice Lansing stepped down into the dusty street with her head bowed so low her chin nearly touched her chest, one trembling hand clutching a carpetbag that held everything she owned in this world, which was precious little now that her reputation had been stripped away like bark from a dying tree. She could feel the eyes on her, even through the veil she wore, black lace that did nothing to hide her shame from a town that already knew her story, whispered from one wagging tongue to another across 300 miles of desert and scrubland. The boarding house keeper, Mrs. Patterson, stood in the doorway with her arms crossed over her ample bosom, lips pursed tight as a drawstring purse, and Beatrice knew before the woman even opened her mouth what words would come tumbling out. "I am sorry, Miss Lansing, but we cannot accommodate you here, Mrs. Patterson said, her voice carrying across the street loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear every syllable. "This is a respectable establishment, and we simply cannot have someone of your reputation staying under our roof. It would not be proper." Beatrice's hands shook harder now, making the carpetbag swing against her skirts. She had traveled for 5 days to reach this place, had spent her last dollars on the coach fare, and had nowhere else to go. Behind her, the stagecoach driver was already pulling away, eager to distance himself from a woman who carried scandal like others carried perfume. "Please," Beatrice whispered, but her voice was too soft to carry any weight, too broken to demand consideration. "I have money for a week's stay. I only need a few days to find work and a more permanent situation." "Work?" Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows shot up toward her hairline. "What manner of work do you imagine you will find in Winslow, given your circumstances? No decent establishment will hire you, and I will not have you bringing that other sort of business to our town." Heat flooded Beatrice's cheeks beneath the veil. She wanted to protest, to explain that she had never done anything improper, that she had been the victim rather than the villain in the story that had destroyed her life. But she had learned over the past months that the truth mattered far less than perception, and perception had already condemned her without trial or mercy. A man's voice cut through the afternoon heat, deep and steady as a church bell. "Madam, that is quite enough." Beatrice looked up through her veil to see a tall figure approaching from across the street, a cowboy by the look of him, with dust on his boots and sun-weathered skin that spoke of long days riding the range. He was perhaps 25 or 26, with dark hair that curled slightly at the collar of his shirt and eyes that were an unusual shade of green, bright as bottled glass held up to the light. "This is none of your concern, Frank Xander, Mrs. Patterson snapped, but her voice had lost some of its sharp edge, replaced by something that sounded almost like nervousness. Frank Xander stopped a few feet from Beatrice, close enough that she could see the kindness in his eyes, a quality she had not encountered in so long that it struck her with nearly physical force. He tipped his hat to her first, a gesture of respect that made her throat tighten with unexpected emotion, before turning his attention back to the boarding house keeper. "I believe it becomes my concern when I see a lady being treated poorly in the middle of our town," Frank said, his voice still calm but carrying an edge of steel beneath the softness. "Particularly when that lady has just endured days of difficult travel and is clearly in need of rest and shelter." "She is no lady," Mrs. Patterson began, but Frank held up one hand to stop her. "Every woman deserves to be treated with basic human dignity and kindness, regardless of what stories may or may not follow her," he said. "That is how my mother raised me, and that is how I intend to conduct myself. Now, if you will not provide Miss Lansing with a room, I will make other arrangements for her myself." Beatrice found her voice, though it came out small and uncertain. "Sir, You do not need to involve yourself in my troubles. I can find somewhere else to stay." Frank turned to her, and when his eyes met hers through the veil, she saw nothing but genuine concern and compassion. "With respect, madam, I do not believe you will find a welcome reception anywhere in town if Mrs. Patterson here has already decided to make a public spectacle of turning you away. Allow me to help. I promise my intentions are entirely honorable." Something in his voice, in the steadiness of his gaze, made Beatrice want to trust him, though her recent experiences had taught her to be wary of trusting anyone, particularly men who offered help. Still, what choice did she have? She was alone in a strange town with no money and no prospects, and night would fall in a few hours. "I do not wish to impose," she said quietly. "It is no imposition," Frank assured her. "My ranch is about 3 miles outside of town. I have a housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, who lives in a cottage on the property with her daughter. They have a spare room, and I am certain they would be happy to accommodate you until you can make more permanent arrangements. You would be quite safe and properly chaperoned." Mrs. Patterson made a dismissive sound in her throat. "Frank Xander, you are going to regret this foolishness. That woman is nothing but trouble, and you will find that out soon enough." Frank's expression did not change, though his jaw tightened slightly. "The only trouble I see right now is the lack of Christian charity being displayed by those who claim to be upstanding members of this community. Good day, Mrs. Patterson." He turned back to Beatrice and offered his arm. "May I help you with your bag, Miss Lansing?" Beatrice hesitated for only a moment before allowing him to take her carpetbag. His fingers brushed hers briefly, and she noticed that his hands were calloused from hard work, but gentle in their movements. She followed him to where a horse stood tied to a hitching post, a beautiful bay gelding with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor. "I am afraid I only have the one horse," Frank said apologetically, "but he is strong enough to carry us both for the ride to the ranch. Would that be acceptable to you?" "Yes," Beatrice said, because again, what choice did she have? But more than that, she found that despite all her reasons to be suspicious, she believed Frank when he said his intentions were honorable. There was something fundamentally decent about him, a quality that shone through in every word and gesture. Frank secured her carpetbag to the saddle, then helped her mount, his hands respectful as he assisted her. He swung up behind her with practiced ease, gathering the reins and leaving a proper amount of space between them as he urged the horse into a walk. As they rode out of town, Beatrice could feel the stares following them, could imagine the conversations that would spread through Winslow like wildfire before sunset. There goes Frank Xander, taking up with that ruined woman. What was he thinking? Does he not know what she did? "Try not to mind them," Frank said softly, as if he could read her thoughts. "Small towns thrive on gossip, but they also move on to new topics quickly enough. In a week, something else will have captured their attention and you will be old news." "You do not even know me," Beatrice said, surprised at her own boldness in speaking. "You do not know what I am supposed to have done. Why would you help me?" Frank was quiet for a moment, guiding the horse around a rocky outcrop before answering. "I do not need to know your past to recognize that you are in need of help in the present. Besides, I have lived long enough to learn that stories are often more fiction than fact, and that the truth usually lies somewhere other than where the gossips place it. You look like someone who has been hurt, not someone who has done the hurting." Tears stung Beatrice's eyes, and she was grateful for the veil that hid them. When was the last time someone had looked at her and seen a victim rather than a villain? When was the last time anyone had offered her kindness without expecting something terrible in return? "Thank you," she whispered. "You cannot know what your help means to me." "You are welcome," Frank said simply. Everyone deserves a chance to start fresh, especially here in the Arizona territory. That is why most of us came west in the first place, is it not? To escape the past and build something new. The ride to the ranch took nearly 40 minutes, during which Frank kept up a gentle stream of conversation, never prying into her history but telling her about the area, about his cattle operation, about the land itself. Beatrice listened, grateful not to have to speak, and found herself relaxing slightly for the first time in months. The ranch, when they arrived, was more substantial than she had expected. A well-built house stood at the center of the property, with a barn, several corrals, and a smaller cottage off to one side. The land stretched out in all directions, dotted with cattle grazing in the distance beneath the enormous Arizona sky. A woman emerged from the cottage as they approached, small and neat with black hair streaked with gray, and an expression of curiosity on her face. Behind her came a younger woman, perhaps 18 or 19, with the same delicate features and watchful eyes. Mrs. Chen, Lily, Frank called out in greeting as he dismounted and helped Beatrice down from the horse. I have brought a guest who needs shelter for a while. This is Miss Beatrice Lansing. She has had some difficulty finding accommodations in town, and I hoped you might have room for her in your cottage. Mrs. Chen's sharp eyes swept over Beatrice, taking in the black veil, the trembling hands, the worn dress that had once been fine but now showed signs of hard traveling and harder circumstances. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her, because she nodded briskly. Of course, she said, her English flavored with an accent that spoke of a Chinese heritage. We have the spare room. Miss Lansing, you are welcome to stay with us as long as you need. Come, you must be tired and hungry from your journey. The kindness in her voice nearly undid Beatrice completely. She had been prepared for more rejection, more scorn, and this unexpected welcome felt like water after days in the desert. Thank you, Beatrice managed to say. I have a little money. I can pay for my room and board. We will discuss that later, Mrs. Chen said firmly. First, you need to rest and eat. Lily, fetch the kettle and prepare some tea. Miss Lansing, please come inside. Frank caught Beatrice's eye before she followed Mrs. Chen into the cottage. You are in good hands here, he said. Mrs. Chen and Lily are wonderful people, and you will be safe and comfortable. I will check on you tomorrow to see how you are settling in and whether there is anything else you might need. You have already done so much, Beatrice said, her voice breaking slightly. I do not know how I can ever repay your kindness. Frank smiled at her, and it transformed his entire face, making him look younger and lighting up those remarkable green eyes. You do not owe me anything, Miss Lansing. I am just glad I was there to help. Now go on and get some rest. Things always look better after a hot meal and a good night's sleep. Beatrice wanted to say more, to somehow express the gratitude and relief flooding through her, but words felt inadequate. Instead, she simply nodded and turned to follow Mrs. Chen into the cottage, leaving Frank standing in the yard with her carpetbag in his hand. The cottage was small but immaculately clean, with simple furniture and cheerful curtains at the windows. Mrs. Chen led Beatrice to a small bedroom at the back, furnished with a narrow bed covered in a colorful quilt, a washstand, and a simple wardrobe. This will be your room, Mrs. Chen said. It is not fancy, but it is comfortable. Lily will bring you water for washing, and then we will have dinner in about an hour. Do you need anything else right now? Beatrice shook her head, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Mrs. Chen studied her for a moment, then gently reached up and lifted the black veil from her face. You do not need to hide here, she said softly. Whatever happened to you, whatever shame you think you carry, you leave it outside this door. Inside this house, you are just Beatrice, A young woman who needs a safe place to rest. That is all." The tears Beatrice had been holding back finally spilled over, running down her cheeks in hot streams. Mrs. Chen made a sympathetic sound and patted her hand before leaving her alone, closing the door quietly behind her. Beatrice sank down onto the bed and let herself cry, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. She cried for everything she had lost, for the life that had been stolen from her, for the months of fear and loneliness and shame. But underneath all that pain, a tiny seed of hope was beginning to take root, planted by the unexpected kindness of a cowboy who had looked at her and seen someone worth helping, someone worth protecting. She did not know what the future held, did not know if she would ever be able to build a new life here in the Arizona territory. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, she had a safe place to sleep and people who had shown her compassion without judgment. It was not much, but it was more than she had dared to hope for when she stepped off that stagecoach. Eventually, her tears subsided, and she rose to wash her face in the basin Lily had brought while she was crying. She removed her travel-stained dress and put on her only other garment, a simple cotton day dress that was faded but clean. Without the veil, she felt exposed and vulnerable, but Mrs. Chen's words echoed in her mind. "You do not need to hide here." Dinner was a quiet affair, taken at a small table in the main room of the cottage. Mrs. Chen had prepared a simple but delicious meal of rice, vegetables, and chicken, and Beatrice found that she was hungrier than she had realized. As they ate, Mrs. Chen and Lily chatted about small matters, including her in the conversation without pressing for information about her past. It was comfortable and normal, two qualities that had been absent from Beatrice's life for so long that they felt almost foreign. After dinner, Beatrice helped wash the dishes despite Mrs. Chen's protests, grateful for something useful to do with her hands. Lily asked her a few shy questions about where she had come from, and Beatrice found herself answering carefully, sharing only the most basic facts. She had come from Kansas. She was 21 years old. She hoped to find work and make a new start in the Arizona territory. If they noticed all the things she did not say, neither of them pressed her on it. Instead, Mrs. Chen suggested that Beatrice might like to retire early after her long journey, and Beatrice accepted gratefully. In the privacy of her small room, she changed into her nightgown and climbed into bed, half expecting to lie awake for hours as she had every night for months, plagued by memories and fears. Instead, she fell asleep almost immediately, lulled by the safety of the cottage and the exhaustion of finally being able to stop running. When Beatrice woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the window and she could hear birds singing outside. For a moment, she could not remember where she was, and panic gripped her chest. Then memory returned, bringing with it a sense of relief that was almost dizzying. She was at Frank Xander's ranch, safe in the cottage with Mrs. Chen and Lily. She rose and dressed quickly, braiding her long brown hair and pinning it up in a simple style. When she emerged from her room, she found Mrs. Chen already up and preparing breakfast. "Good morning," Mrs. Chen greeted her. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in months," Beatrice admitted. "Thank you again for taking me in." "It is our pleasure," Mrs. Chen said. "Lily has gone to help Mr. Frank with the morning chores. She often assists him in the barn. After breakfast, perhaps you would like to take a walk around the property. It is a beautiful morning, and I think some fresh air and sunshine would do you good." Beatrice agreed, and after a breakfast of eggs and fresh bread, she stepped outside into the Arizona morning. The air was already warm, promising real heat later in the day, but the sky was a brilliant blue, and the landscape had a stark beauty that appealed to something deep inside her. She was walking toward the corral, watching the horses grazing peacefully, when she heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Frank approaching. He had clearly been working already, his shirt sleeves rolled up and his hat pushed back on his head. "Good morning, Miss Lansing," he said, tipping his hat to her. "I trust you slept well." "Very well, thank you," Beatrice replied. "And please, you can call me Beatrice. After everything you have done for me, such formality seems unnecessary." Frank smiled. "Only if you will call me Frank. Miss Lansing makes me feel like I am in trouble with a schoolteacher." Beatrice found herself smiling back, the expression feeling strange on her face after so long. "Very well, Frank. I wanted to thank you again for your kindness yesterday. You saved me from a very difficult situation." "I am glad I was there to help," Frank said. He hesitated for a moment, then continued. "I know it is none of my business, but I wanted you to know that if you are looking for work, I could use some help here at the ranch. Mrs. Chen does the cooking and cleaning in the main house, and Lily helps with various tasks, but there is always more to be done. I would be happy to employ you if you are interested." Beatrice stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "You would hire me, even knowing what people in town are saying about me?" "I do not care what people in town say," Frank said firmly. "What I know is that you are a person in need of help and employment, and I am in a position to provide both. The work would not be glamorous. I need help with the bookkeeping, correspondence, and various household matters. I would pay you a fair wage, and you could continue to stay at the cottage with Mrs. Chen and Lily if that arrangement suits you." "It suits me very well," Beatrice said, her heart beginning to pound with hope. "But Frank, you should understand what people are saying. They think I am a fallen woman, that I had an improper relationship with a married man. It is not true, but that hardly matters. The scandal follows me regardless." Frank met her eyes steadily. "What is the truth?" Beatrice took a deep breath, preparing to tell her story properly for the first time since the nightmare began. "The truth is that I was employed as a governess for a wealthy family in Topeka, Kansas. The husband, Mr. Marcus Brennan, began paying me unwanted attention. I rebuffed him repeatedly, but he was persistent. One day his wife came home unexpectedly and found him forcing himself on me. He was tearing at my dress, and I was fighting him, but all his wife saw was the two of us together in a compromising position." Her voice shook as she continued. "Mrs. Brennan immediately assumed I had seduced her husband. Nothing I said could convince her otherwise. Mr. Brennan, to save himself, told her I had been pursuing him for months, that I had thrown myself at him. She believed him, of course. Why would she not? He was her husband, a respected businessman, and I was just the governess." Frank's expression had darkened as she spoke, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "He forced himself on you, and you were blamed for it." "Yes," Beatrice whispered. "Mrs. Brennan dismissed me without references, and told everyone in her social circle that I was a seductress who had tried to steal her husband. The story spread quickly. I could not find work anywhere in Topeka. People would cross the street to avoid me. Someone threw rocks through the window of my boarding house room. I finally realized I had to leave, had to go somewhere far away and try to start over. I chose the Arizona Territory because it seemed like a place where people might be more willing to let the past stay in the past." "I am so sorry that happened to you," Frank said, his voice rough with emotion. "No woman should have to endure such treatment, and certainly not for being the victim of a man's base behavior. Thank you for trusting me with the truth." "Do you believe me?" Beatrice asked, hardly daring to hope. "Of course I believe you," Frank said without hesitation. "I believed you yesterday, before I even knew your story. I could see in your eyes that you were someone who had been wronged, not someone who had done wrong. And now that I know what really happened, I am even more certain that my offer of employment stands. You deserve a chance to rebuild your life, and I would be honored to help you do that." Beatrice felt tears threatening again, but this time they were tears of relief and gratitude rather than despair. "I accept your offer, Frank. Thank you. You cannot imagine what this means to me." "Then it is settled," Frank said, his expression lightening. "You can start today if you feel up to it. I have months of correspondence piled up in my office that needs attention, and my bookkeeping is in a sorry state. I am much better with cattle and horses than I am with paperwork." "I would be happy to help with all of that," Beatrice said. "Organizing paperwork and managing household accounts were part of my duties as a governess. I believe I can be quite useful to you." Frank led her to the main house, a comfortable structure with wide porches and large windows that let in plenty of light. Inside, the furnishings were simple but well made, clearly chosen for function rather than fashion. He showed her to a small office off the main room, where papers were indeed piled haphazardly on a desk and overflowing from several boxes. "I am afraid it is a bit of a mess," Frank said apologetically. "I keep meaning to sort through it all, but ranch work always seems to take priority." "Do not worry," Beatrice assured him. "I will have this organized in no time. It will actually be rather satisfying to bring order to chaos." Frank grinned at her. "Then I will leave you to it. If you need anything, just call out. I will be working in the barn most of the morning, but I will check on you around midday." Left alone in the office, Beatrice surveyed the paperwork with a practiced eye. It was indeed a mess, but not an insurmountable one. She began by sorting everything into categories: correspondence that needed responses, bills that needed to be paid, receipts that needed to be filed, and various other documents. As she worked, she found herself relaxing into the familiar rhythms of the task, her mind focusing on the practical matters at hand rather than dwelling on the painful past. Hours passed without her noticing, and she was surprised when Frank appeared in the doorway with a tray containing sandwiches and lemonade. "Mrs. Chen thought you might be ready for some lunch," he said, setting the tray on a cleared corner of the desk. "And I wanted to see how you were managing with all this chaos." "It is coming along well," Beatrice said, gesturing to the neat stacks she had created. "I have sorted everything, and I have begun drafting responses to the most urgent correspondence. You have several business opportunities here that should not be ignored, and a few bills that are approaching their due dates." Frank looked impressed as he examined her work. "You have accomplished more in one morning than I would have managed in a week. I can already tell that hiring you was one of the smartest decisions I have made." They ate lunch together, and Frank told her more about the ranch and his plans for expanding his cattle operation. Beatrice found herself enjoying the conversation, appreciating the way Frank spoke to her as an equal rather than as someone lesser or damaged. He asked her opinion on various business matters, actually listening to her responses and taking her suggestions seriously. "You have a good head for this," Frank said as they finished their meal. "Have you had business training?" "Not formal training," Beatrice admitted. "But my father was a merchant before he died, and he used to let me help with his accounts when I was young. I enjoyed it, the way numbers and ledgers could tell a story about how a business was operating. After he passed, I had to find employment, and being a governess seemed like the most respectable option available to me. But I always missed the business side of things." "Well, you will have plenty of opportunity to exercise those skills here," Frank said. "I want to expand the herd and possibly begin breeding horses as well as cattle. I could use someone with business sense to help me plan and execute that expansion wisely." They spent the afternoon going over the ranch's finances together, with Beatrice asking questions and making notes as Frank explained his operations and goals. She found herself becoming genuinely interested in the work, seeing the potential in what Frank was trying to build. More than that, she found herself enjoying Frank's company. He was intelligent and ambitious, but also kind and respectful, treating her like a valued colleague rather than a charity case. As the sun began to lower in the sky, Frank suggested they call it a day. "You have done more than enough for your first day of work," he said. "I imagine Mrs. Chen will have dinner ready soon and you should rest. We can continue this tomorrow." Beatrice gathered her notes and stood, stretching muscles that had grown stiff from sitting. "Thank you, Frank, for everything. Not just the job, but for treating me like a normal person, like someone whose opinions matter. You cannot know how much that means after months of being treated like I am invisible or contagious." Frank stood as well, his expression serious. "You are not invisible, Beatrice. And you are certainly not contagious. You are an intelligent, capable woman who had something terrible happen to her through no fault of her own. Anyone who cannot see that is a fool, and their opinion is not worth your concern." On impulse, Beatrice reached out and touched his arm lightly. "You are a good man, Frank Xander. I am very grateful that you were the one who found me on that street yesterday." Frank looked down at where her hand rested on his arm, and Beatrice saw something flicker in his eyes, an emotion she could not quite name. When he raised his gaze to meet hers, there was a warmth there that made her breath catch in her throat. "I am the grateful one," he said softly. "I think you are going to be very good for this ranch, Beatrice, and I hope you will stay for a long time." Beatrice withdrew her hand, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the moment, but she smiled at him. "I hope so too." The days settled into a comfortable routine after that. Beatrice spent her mornings working in the office, managing Frank's correspondence and organizing his financial records. She discovered that he was actually quite wealthy, having built his ranch from nothing over the past 5 years through hard work and shrewd business decisions. His bookkeeping might have been haphazard, but his instincts were sound, and with her help organizing the information, he was able to make even better decisions about expanding his operations. In the afternoons, she often helped Mrs. Chen with various household tasks or walked the property, learning the rhythms of ranch life. Lily became a friend, the young woman's gentle nature and lack of judgment making her easy to talk to. In the evenings, Frank would sometimes join them at the cottage for dinner, and they would all sit together talking and laughing until late. Beatrice had not laughed so much in years, had not felt so comfortable in her own skin or so hopeful about the future. The weight of shame that had pressed down on her for months began to lift, replaced by a growing sense of belonging and purpose. She also found herself increasingly drawn to Frank. He was unfailingly kind and respectful, never overstepping proper boundaries, but there was something in the way he looked at her sometimes, a warmth and admiration that made her heart beat faster. She caught herself watching him as he worked with the horses or talked business with visiting cattle buyers, admiring the strength in his hands and the laugh lines around his eyes. It was dangerous, she knew, to develop feelings for her employer, especially given her recent past. She had promised herself she would never again trust a man, never again put herself in a vulnerable position. But Frank was different from any man she had ever known. He was genuinely good, with an integrity that shone through in everything he did. About 3 weeks after her arrival, Frank asked if she would accompany him into town to purchase supplies. Beatrice hesitated, remembering the hostile reception she had received on her first day in Winslow. "I understand if you would rather not," Frank said gently. "But I think it would be good for you to show your face in town, to let people see that you are a respectable woman doing honest work. The longer you hide away out here, the more power you give to their gossip and assumptions." "You are right," Beatrice said, squaring her shoulders. "I will not let fear control my life. I will go with you." The ride into town was pleasant, with Frank keeping up a steady stream of conversation that helped distract Beatrice from her nervousness. When they arrived in Winslow, she could feel the stares again, but Frank stayed close to her side, his presence protective without being possessive. They went first to the general store, where the proprietor, Mr. Jameson, greeted Frank warmly before his gaze landed on Beatrice and cooled considerably. "Frank," Mr. Jameson said carefully, "I heard you had taken in that woman, but I did not quite believe it." "Miss Lansing is my bookkeeper and business manager," Frank said evenly. "She has been invaluable in helping me organize my affairs. I could not run the ranch half as efficiently without her. Beatrice, this is Mr. Jameson. He runs the best general store in the territory." Beatrice extended her hand, forcing herself to meet Mr. Jameson's eyes despite the disapproval she saw there. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Jameson. Frank speaks very highly of your establishment." Mr. Jameson looked at her outstretched hand for a long moment before shaking it briefly. "Welcome to Winslow, Miss Lansing. I hope your stay here will be more permanent than your arrival suggested." "I hope so as well," Beatrice said. "I am very grateful for the opportunity Mr. Xander has given me to make a fresh start here." As they moved through the store gathering supplies, Beatrice was aware of other customers watching them and whispering behind their hands. But she kept her head high, refusing to show the fear and shame that still lurked beneath her growing confidence. Frank remained at her side, treating her with obvious respect and including her in decisions about purchases, making it clear to anyone watching that he valued her opinion and presence. They encountered Mrs. Patterson on the street as they were loading their purchases into Frank's wagon. The boarding house keeper's eyes widened when she saw Beatrice, and her mouth pursed in that familiar expression of disapproval. "Frank Xander," she said sharply, "I see you are still keeping company with that woman. People are talking, you know. They are saying that you have taken her in as more than just an employee." Frank's expression hardened. "People should be more careful about what they say, particularly when it involves matters they know nothing about. Miss Lansing works for me in a purely professional capacity, and even if that were not the case, it would be none of your business or anyone else's. I suggest you find more constructive ways to occupy your time than spreading malicious gossip about a woman who has done nothing to deserve such treatment." Mrs. Patterson's face flushed red. "Well, I never. I was simply trying to warn you that associating with her will damage your reputation as well. My reputation can withstand association with an honest, hard-working woman far better than it can withstand being known as someone who lacks compassion and basic human decency," Frank replied. "Good day, Mrs. Patterson." He helped Beatrice into the wagon and climbed up beside her, snapping the reins to set the horses moving. Beatrice sat in silence for several minutes, processing what had just happened. "You did not have to defend me like that," she finally said. "You are right that associating with me could damage your standing in the community." "I do not care about standing in a community that would judge someone so harshly based on rumors and gossip," Frank said. "You are worth 10 of Mrs. Patterson and her ilk. Besides, I meant what I said. You have done nothing to deserve the treatment you have received, and I will not stand by silently while people malign your character." "You called me beautiful," Beatrice said softly, remembering something he had said during the confrontation with Mrs. Patterson, words that had slipped past her conscious notice in the heat of the moment but were coming back to her now. He had said something about her being a beautiful woman who deserved respect, Frank glanced at her, and she saw color rise in his cheeks. "I did. Because you are. Beautiful, I mean. Inside and out. I hope that does not make you uncomfortable." "It does not," Beatrice said, her own cheeks warming. "It makes me feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in longer than I can remember. No one has called me beautiful in years, and certainly not since the scandal. Most people look at me and see only the shame they think I carry." "I have never seen shame when I look at you," Frank said quietly. "I see strength and resilience and grace. I see a woman who has survived terrible circumstances and is fighting to build a new life for herself. That is what I find beautiful about you." Beatrice felt her heart swell with emotion. Without thinking, she reached across the wagon seat and took his hand. Frank's fingers closed around hers, warm and strong, and they rode the rest of the way back to the ranch in comfortable silence, hands clasped between them. That evening, after dinner at the cottage, Frank asked Beatrice to take a walk with him. They strolled out toward the eastern pasture, where the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed almost unreal in their brilliance. "I need to tell you something," Frank said as they walked, "and I hope you will not think less of me for the honesty." Beatrice's heart began to beat faster. "What is it?" Frank stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I have developed feelings for you, Beatrice, strong feelings. I know it has only been a few weeks since we met, and I know that you have been through a terrible ordeal that probably makes trusting men very difficult. But I cannot keep pretending that what I feel for you is merely the concern of an employer for his employee. You have become very important to me, and I needed you to know that." Beatrice stared up at him, her mind reeling. Part of her wanted to pull away to protect herself from the possibility of being hurt again. But a larger part, the part that had been growing stronger over the past weeks, wanted nothing more than to step closer to him. "I have feelings for you as well," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have been trying to ignore them, trying to convince myself that they are just gratitude for your kindness. But it is more than that. You make me feel safe and valued and seen. You make me want to trust again, to hope again. I am frightened by how much I care about you." Frank lifted one hand to cup her cheek gently. "You do not have to be frightened. I would never hurt you, Beatrice. I would never take advantage of your trust or use my position to pressure you into anything. What I feel for you is genuine and respectful, and if you need time before we explore these feelings further, I will wait as long as necessary." "What if the gossip gets worse?" Beatrice asked. "What if people truly do damage your reputation by associating you with me? You have worked so hard to build your ranch and your standing in this community. Then I will build new standing based on the truth of who we are rather than the lies people tell about us," Frank said firmly. "You are more important to me than what narrow-minded gossips think. If I have to choose between you and their approval, I choose you every single time." Beatrice felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but these were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "No one has ever chosen me before. No one has ever thought I was worth the trouble or the scandal." "Then they were fools," Frank said, wiping her tears away with his thumbs. "You are worth everything, Beatrice. You are smart and capable and kind and, yes, incredibly beautiful. I thank God every day that I was walking past that boarding house at the exact moment you needed help, because meeting you has changed my life." "You changed mine too," Beatrice whispered. "You saved me, Frank. Not just from being homeless and alone, but from believing that I was everything those people said I was. You looked at me and saw someone worth saving, worth helping, worth caring about. You gave me back my sense of self-worth." "You always had worth," Frank said. "I just helped you remember it." Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away if she wanted to, Frank leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle and sweet, nothing like the forced, brutal kiss Marcus Brennan had tried to take from her. This kiss was an offering, a question, and Beatrice answered it by rising on her toes and kissing him back, pouring all her gratitude and affection and growing love into the connection between them. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard, and Frank rested his forehead against hers. "I am going to court you properly," he said. "I know that might seem backward given that we have just kissed, but I want to do this right. I want to take you to dinner, bring you flowers, spend time getting to know every part of you, and when enough time has passed that you are absolutely certain of your feelings and mine, I am going to ask you to marry me. You want to marry me?" Beatrice asked, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "Even knowing about my past, about the scandal, your past does not define you," Frank said. "And I do not care about the scandal. All I care about is building a future with you if you will have me, but there is no rush. We will take our time and do this properly." "I would like that," Beatrice said, smiling up at him through her tears. "I would like that very much." The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Beatrice's life. Frank courted her with old-fashioned gentleness, bringing her wildflowers from the range and taking her on evening rides to show her beautiful spots on his land. They spent hours talking, sharing their histories and dreams, learning the contours of each other's minds and hearts. Mrs. Chen and Lily were delighted by the developing romance, with Mrs. Chen declaring that she had known from the first day that Frank and Beatrice were meant for each other. The older woman became an enthusiastic supporter of the courtship, making sure that Beatrice always looked her best when Frank came to call and discreetly giving them privacy for their conversations. The gossip in town did intensify for a while, with various stories circulating about the exact nature of Frank and Beatrice's relationship. But Frank remained steadfast in his public support of her, introducing her as his bookkeeper and friend to everyone they met, and making it clear that he would not tolerate disrespect toward her. Gradually, the tone of the gossip began to shift. People noticed that Beatrice was clearly intelligent and hardworking, that she conducted herself with quiet dignity, and that Frank's ranch was thriving under her business management. A few of the more progressive women in town began greeting her politely when they encountered her, and Mr. Jameson at the general store started treating her with something approaching respect. The turning point came about 2 months after Beatrice's arrival, when she and Frank attended a community dance together. Beatrice had been nervous about such a public appearance, but Frank insisted that it was important for them to participate in community events rather than hiding away at the ranch. They entered the dance hall together, Frank resplendent in a dark suit and Beatrice wearing a modest but becoming blue dress that Mrs. Chen had helped her sew from fabric Frank had bought for her in town. The conversation died down as people noticed them, and Beatrice felt the familiar weight of dozens of eyes on her. But Frank simply smiled, offered her his arm, and led her onto the dance floor. As they began to waltz, other couples gradually joined them, and soon the hall was filled with dancers. Frank was a good dancer, leading Beatrice confidently through the steps, and she found herself enjoying the music and movement despite her earlier anxiety. During a break between dances, a woman approached them tentatively. She was perhaps 40, well-dressed and with a kind face that held a hint of nervousness. "Mr. Xander, Miss Lansing," she said. "I am Sarah Mitchell. My husband and I own the ranch neighboring yours to the south. I wanted to introduce myself and welcome Miss Lansing to our community." "Thank you, Mrs. Mitchell," Beatrice said, surprised and touched by the gesture. "That is very kind of you." "I also wanted to apologize," Mrs. Mitchell continued, glancing around to make sure they would not be overheard. "I am ashamed to say that I participated in the gossip about you when you first arrived, before I knew anything about you or your situation. That was wrong of me, and I am sorry. Since then, I have learned more about your character from observing how hard you work and how kindly you treat everyone you encounter. I should not have judged you based on rumors." Beatrice felt tears pricking her eyes again, moved by the unexpected apology. "I appreciate your saying that, Mrs. Mitchell. It means a great deal to me. Would you and Mr. Xander like to join my husband and me for dinner next week?" Mrs. Mitchell asked. "I think you would find that there are several of us in this community who are ready to welcome you properly and put the ugly gossip behind us." Frank squeezed Beatrice's hand. "We would be delighted to accept your invitation, Mrs. Mitchell. Thank you." As Mrs. Mitchell walked away, Beatrice turned to Frank with wonder in her eyes. "Did that really just happen?" "It did," Frank said, smiling broadly. "I told you that people would come around once they got to know you. You are impossible not to like, Beatrice." The evening ended on a high note, with several other community members approaching to introduce themselves and welcome Beatrice. It was not universal acceptance by any means, but it was a beginning, a sign that she might actually be able to build a life here without the constant weight of scandal hanging over her. As Frank drove her home that night, Beatrice leaned against his shoulder, feeling a contentment she had never experienced before. "Thank you," she said softly, "for believing in me, for standing by me, for helping me see that I deserve good things." "You deserve everything good this life has to offer," Frank replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "And I intend to spend the rest of my days making sure you get it." 3 months after Beatrice arrived in Winslow, Frank proposed to her properly. He took her to a beautiful spot on the ranch where a small stream ran through a grove of cottonwood trees, creating a shaded oasis in the Arizona landscape. There, on one knee in the soft grass, he offered her a ring that had belonged to his mother and asked her to be his wife. Beatrice said yes through happy tears, and Frank swept her up in his arms, spinning her around as they both laughed with pure joy. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, and Beatrice kissed him back with all the love and passion she had been holding in reserve, finally allowing herself to fully believe that this was real, that she was truly loved and wanted and valued. They were married a month later in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with Mrs. Chen, Lily, and a few friends from town in attendance. Beatrice wore a white dress that the women had helped her make, and Frank looked handsome in his best suit. The local minister performed the ceremony, having been won over by Frank's obvious devotion and Beatrice's quiet grace. As they exchanged vows, promising to love and honor each other for all their days, Beatrice felt the last remnants of shame and fear fall away. She was no longer a woman defined by scandal and tragedy. She was Frank Xander's wife, a beloved partner in building a life and a future together. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, with Frank taking infinite care to make sure Beatrice felt safe and cherished. He erased the memory of Marcus Brennan's assault with his gentleness, showing her what physical love was meant to be when it was given freely and received joyfully. Beatrice discovered a passion she had not known she possessed, and a capacity for intimacy that the trauma of her past had not destroyed. In the months that followed, Beatrice and Frank built their life together with joy and purpose. She continued managing the business side of the ranch, proving invaluable as Frank expanded his operations to include horse breeding as they had discussed. Together, they made decisions about purchasing new stock, negotiating contracts with buyers, and investing in improvements to the property. But more than that, they built a partnership based on mutual respect, deep affection, and genuine friendship. They worked side by side during the day and fell asleep in each other's arms at night. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, learning to read each other's moods and needs with increasing accuracy. They laughed together, sometimes over silly things and sometimes over private jokes that only they understood. Beatrice also began to find her place in the community. With Frank's support and her own quiet determination, she gradually won over most of the town's residents. She joined the Ladies' Church Auxiliary and contributed to charitable causes. She befriended other ranch wives and offered her business expertise to help several struggling families better manage their finances. There were still those who remembered the scandal and held it against her, Mrs. Patterson chief among them. But Beatrice learned to let their disapproval roll off her back, knowing that she had nothing to be ashamed of, and that the opinions of narrow-minded gossips were not worth her concern. A year after their wedding, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant. She told Frank one evening as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, and the look of pure joy on his face made her heart overflow with happiness. "We are going to have a baby," Frank said wonderingly, placing his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "You are going to be a mother and I am going to be a father. Beatrice, I could not be happier." "Neither could I," Beatrice said, covering his hand with hers. "A year ago I thought my life was over, that I would never have a family or a home or any of the things I had dreamed of. Now I have all of that and more. I have you and this ranch and our friends, and soon we will have a child. It seems almost too good to be true." "It is true," Frank assured her, pulling her close and kissing her temple. "This is your life now, Beatrice, our life. And it is only going to get better." The pregnancy was not easy, particularly during the hot Arizona summer, but Frank was attentive and caring, making sure Beatrice got plenty of rest and was not overworking herself. Mrs. Chen fussed over her constantly, preparing special foods and making sure she was comfortable. Lily was excited about the prospect of a baby on the ranch and began knitting tiny clothes and blankets. In the early spring of 1883, Beatrice gave birth to a healthy baby boy after a long and difficult labor. Frank stayed by her side throughout, holding her hand and murmuring encouragement, his face pale with worry but his presence steady and reassuring. When the midwife finally placed their son in Beatrice's arms, both she and Frank wept with joy and relief. The baby had Frank's green eyes and a surprising amount of dark hair, and he was perfect in every way. "What should we name him?" Beatrice asked, gazing down at her son with awe. "I was thinking we might name him after your father," Frank said. "You have told me what a good man he was, how much you loved him. It would be a way of honoring his memory." Beatrice felt fresh tears spring to her eyes at the thoughtfulness of the suggestion. "His name was Benjamin. Benjamin Lansing. Would you mind if our son was Benjamin Xander?" "I think that is perfect," Frank said, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. "Hello, Benjamin. Welcome to the world, son." Benjamin was a happy, healthy baby who quickly became the center of their world. Frank was a devoted father, spending hours holding his son and talking to him in a soft voice, telling him about the ranch and the horses, and all the things they would do together when Benjamin was older. Beatrice discovered that motherhood came naturally to her, perhaps because of her years as a governess. She loved caring for Benjamin, watching him grow and change with each passing day. She also found that having a child deepened her relationship with Frank even further, creating new bonds of shared love and purpose. The ranch continued to prosper under their joint management. Frank's cattle operation was thriving, and his new horse breeding program was gaining recognition throughout the territory. Beatrice's careful financial management ensured that they were able to save money and invest wisely, building security for their growing family. When Benjamin was 2 years old, Beatrice became pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to a daughter with her brown hair and Frank's green eyes. They named her Rose, and she proved to be as spirited and strong-willed as her mother, keeping everyone on their toes from the moment she could crawl. Life settled into a happy rhythm, with the ranch growing and the children thriving. Beatrice sometimes thought back to that terrible day when she had arrived in Winslow, covered in shame and convinced that her life was over. It seemed like a lifetime ago, like something that had happened to a different person entirely. One evening, when Benjamin was 5 and Rose was 3, Beatrice stood on the porch watching her children play in the yard while Frank worked with a young horse in the corral. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and a cool breeze brought relief from the day's heat. Frank finished with the horse and walked over to join her, slipping his arm around her waist and pulling her close. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her cheek. "I was thinking about how grateful I am," Beatrice said, leaning into his embrace. "For you, for our children, for this life we have built together. When I stepped off that stagecoach 5 years ago, I was broken and hopeless. I never imagined I could be this happy." "I knew the moment I saw you that you were someone special," Frank said. "I could see past the shame and fear to the strong, beautiful woman underneath. I am the grateful one, Beatrice. You have made my life complete in ways I did not even know were possible." "You saved me," Beatrice said simply. "When everyone else looked at me and saw only scandal and disgrace, you looked at me and saw someone worth helping, someone worth believing in. You covered my shame with kindness and called me beautiful when I felt like the most worthless person alive. You gave me back my life, Frank. You gave me everything." "We saved each other," Frank corrected gently. "Before you came, I was just going through the motions of life, working hard but without any real purpose beyond building a successful ranch. You gave me something to work for, someone to build a future with. You made my house a home and filled my life with love and meaning. We are partners, Beatrice. We always have been, right from that first day." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their children play as the sun continued its descent. Benjamin was showing Rose how to stack rocks, and her delighted laughter rang out across the yard when she managed to balance one stone on top of another. "I want to expand the house," Frank said after a while. "Add on a few more rooms. I have a feeling our family is not quite complete yet." Beatrice smiled, placing her hand over her stomach where another new life was just beginning to grow. "You might be right about that," she said softly. Frank's eyes widened as he caught her meaning. "Another baby. Really, really," Beatrice confirmed. "I was going to tell you tonight at dinner, but this moment feels right." Frank let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around just as he had when she accepted his proposal 5 years earlier. Benjamin and Rose looked over at the commotion, and Rose immediately demanded that her father pick her up and spin her too, sending everyone into fits of laughter. That night, after the children were asleep, Beatrice and Frank lay in bed talking about the future, about the additions they would make to the house, about names for the new baby, about their dreams for their growing family. "You ever regret it?" Beatrice asked quietly. "Taking me in that day, standing up for me against all the gossip and scandal. Your life would have been so much simpler if you had just walked past that boarding house." "Not for one second," Frank said firmly, pulling her closer. "That day was the best day of my life, even though I did not know it at the time. Finding you, helping you, falling in love with you, it was all meant to be. I truly believe that God put me on that street at that exact moment because He knew we needed each other." "I believe that too," Beatrice whispered. I spent so long thinking I was being punished, that the terrible things that happened to me were some kind of divine judgment. But they were not punishment. They were the path that led me to you, to this life, to everything I have now. I would not change a single thing about my journey because it brought me here. Even the pain, Frank asked gently. Even the pain, Beatrice confirmed, because the pain made me strong enough to appreciate what we have. It taught me to recognize real kindness when I saw it, real love when it was offered. If I had not been broken down to nothing, I might not have been able to see how precious it was when you built me back up. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, secure in their love and their shared future. The years continued to pass, bringing new joys and occasional challenges. Beatrice gave birth to another son, whom they named Thomas, and 2 years after that, twin girls they named Sarah and Elizabeth. The house expanded to accommodate the growing family, and the ranch expanded as well, becoming one of the most successful operations in the territory. Benjamin grew into a responsible young man who loved working with the horses and showed every sign of following in his father's footsteps. Rose was bright and headstrong, already showing the business acumen she had inherited from her mother. Thomas was quiet and thoughtful, while the twins were energetic and adventurous, keeping everyone on their toes. Beatrice and Frank raised their children with love and wisdom, teaching them the values of hard work, kindness, and integrity. They told their children the story of how they had met, not shying away from the difficult parts, but emphasizing the importance of looking past surface judgments to see people's true character. Mrs. Chen and Lily remained part of the extended family, with Lily eventually marrying a kind rancher from a neighboring property and starting her own family. Mrs. Chen continued to live in the cottage, now serving more as a beloved grandmother figure to Beatrice and Frank's children than as an employee. The scandal that had once threatened to define Beatrice became nothing more than a distant memory, occasionally referenced but no longer carrying any real power. She had proven herself through years of hard work, dedication to her family, and service to her community. By the time their oldest children were grown, no one in Winslow remembered or cared about the gossip that had swirled around Beatrice's arrival. Frank and Beatrice grew old together, their love deepening and maturing with each passing year. They weathered hardships together, including droughts that threatened the ranch, illnesses that scared them, and the inevitable losses that come with long life. But through it all, they remained partners, friends, and passionate lovers, their bond unbreakable. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Frank organized a celebration at the ranch, inviting friends and family from across the territory. As Beatrice looked around at her children, now grown with families of their own, at her grandchildren playing in the yard where she had once watched Benjamin and Rose stack rocks, at the community of friends they had built over the years, she felt overwhelming gratitude for the life she had been given. Frank found her standing alone on the porch, taking a moment of quiet amidst the celebration. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Happy anniversary, my love," he murmured. 30 years and you still take my breath away. 30 years since you saw a broken woman on a street corner and decided she was worth saving, Beatrice said, covering his hands with hers. 30 years since you covered my shame with kindness and called me beautiful when I felt like nothing. Best 30 years of my life, Frank Xander. Best 30 years of mine too, Frank said. And if we are blessed with 30 more, I will count myself the luckiest man who ever lived. We have built something beautiful, have we not? Beatrice asked, gesturing to the scene before them, the ranch stretching out under the Arizona sky, the house filled with laughter and love, the children and grandchildren who carried their legacy forward. "We have built something magnificent," Frank agreed. "But the most beautiful thing we ever built was our love, Beatrice. That was the foundation for everything else." Beatrice turned in his arms to face him, seeing the lines that time and sun had etched into his beloved face, the gray that now threaded through his dark hair, the same green eyes that had looked at her with such kindness on that first day. "I love you," she said simply. "More than I ever thought it was possible to love another person. You are my home, Frank. You always have been, from the moment you stepped between me and Mrs. Patterson's cruelty. You will always be my home." "And you are mine," Frank said, kissing her softly. "My home, my heart, my everything." They stood together on the porch, holding each other as they had for 30 years. As the sun set over the land they had built together, over the family they had created, over the life that had seemed impossible when Beatrice first arrived covered in shame, but that had blossomed into something more wonderful than either of them could have imagined. Inside the house, their oldest grandson struck up a tune on his guitar, and soon others joined in singing. Frank offered Beatrice his hand. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Xander?" "Always," Beatrice said, taking his hand and letting him lead her back into the celebration, back into the warmth and light and love that they had built together from nothing but kindness, compassion, and the courage to look past shame to see the beautiful soul underneath. As they danced, surrounded by the family and community they had created, Beatrice sent up a silent prayer of thanksgiving. She had arrived in Winslow broken and hopeless, believing her life was over. Instead, she had found a new beginning, a great love, and a beautiful life that exceeded her wildest dreams. And it had all started with a cowboy who looked at her and saw not shame, but possibility. Not disgrace, but dignity. Not a fallen woman, but a beautiful soul worth saving, worth loving, worth building a life with. That cowboy had become her husband, her partner, her greatest love. Together, they had created a legacy that would extend far beyond their own lives, through their children and grandchildren, through the values they had instilled and the love they had shared. As the music swelled and Frank spun her around the floor with the same joy he had shown on their wedding day 30 years earlier, Beatrice knew with absolute certainty that every moment of pain she had endured had been worth it to arrive at this moment, this life, this love. She had been covered in shame when she arrived in Winslow, Arizona Territory in 1878. But Frank Xander had covered her in kindness, had called her beautiful, and had shown her that redemption and new beginnings were always possible for those brave enough to accept them. Now, in 1913, as they celebrated 3 decades of marriage surrounded by the fruits of their love and labor, Beatrice could say with complete honesty that she had lived a beautiful life, full of purpose and passion and profound joy. And it had all begun with one act of kindness from a good man who saw her worth when no one else would. That was a gift she would treasure until her last breath, and beyond.